And we are live, everyone. So good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I'm really excited about today's session for a number of reasons. So last week, we wrapped up with the Gord Downey Cheney Wenjack Fund for Secret Path Week. It's We've done it a couple of years in a row now. It's the second week of October, third week of October, and it's all about celebrating Indigenous stories, activists, educators, and scientists from across the globe. So we did 14 sessions during the week. It was an incredible exploration of history, culture, tradition, and the modern day status of Indigenous peoples in Canada. And today's session is a nice blend between lead-in between that and our theme for this month in general, which is space. So we have done several sessions with astronauts. We've got more coming down the pipeline, amazing NASA engineers, Canadian Space Agency, and more. And I'm always thrilled to announce our speaker today. So we are joined live by Aaron Yazzie. He is a Navajo mechanical engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So he has brought in Navajo students from across where he lives and around the southern United States in the last few sessions that he's done with us. Always a thrill to get to speak to them directly and share his amazing story. I also want to take the chance today to say that I'm in Toronto, so I'm on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. It's something that I think that whether you're in Canada, the States, or worldwide, we should acknowledge and understand that tradition, history, and the millions of people that are Indigenous, First Nations, Native, Métis, Inuit, that still inhabit our fantastic countries. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. Again, as a mechanical engineer at NASA, he gets the chance to design the tools that are the first things to explore new worlds. And if there is a cooler job than that, I don't know what it is. So Aaron's going to tell us a little bit about his story today and his work in educating the public in STEM as well. So Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today, and take us away.
All right, thanks so much for that introduction, Jesse. Hi, everybody. I'm going to introduce myself real quick in my own language, the Navajo language. Yad she'e Aaron Yazzie yanashia ashihinishle turajitni bashish chin kia ani adishache tolkhane dashanal. Hi, everybody. Basically, what that translates to is my introducing you and sharing what my clans are. So my clans are something that I've adopted from my parents and my grandparents, similar to like how you got your last name. So I got my first clan from my mother, which is the Salt clan. So that's the same clan that I am. I got my second clan from my father. That's Bitterwater. And then he got his clan from his mother. And so on. So I am originally from Holbrook, Arizona, which is a small border town near the Navajo Nation. And I currently live in Los Angeles area, working at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I've been living and working here for the past 12 years about as a mechanical engineer. What we specialize in here at JPL is robotic space exploration missions. And in that area, within all those missions, I get to work in the area that deals with sample acquisition and handling. So that's basically all the ways in which we might grab rock samples or scoop up loose rocky material from places like a moon or a asteroid or Mars. And hold on, let me check. Okay. And so let me, I have a bunch of cool pictures and slides to show you guys real quick. And then once I get through that, we'll have some time for questions at the end.
Fantastic. While Aaron's bringing these up too, we had shared some of these beforehand to our classes, but I want to pass along, Aaron has a website, aaronyazi.com, so you can check that out, and is on Twitter at Yazzie Says. So check those out either before, during, after the broadcast, and you're good to go. And Aaron, looks like your presentation's up, so we'll bring that up. And when it's full screen, we'll fill it. There we go, perfect. If you want to press stop sharing at the bottom there in the StreamYard thing, it'll just get rid of that little tab. And oh, not stop sharing. Sorry. Hide. Wrong button.
Okay. Oh, here, maybe I can do. Oh yeah, let's do that.
Dear.
Now we're in within. Let's see if I can go back to here.
Perfect. There you go.
And let me push hide there. So now is everything good? You can see everything fine?
All set. You're perfect.
Okay, cool. So here's the first slide. I like to tell people that my job is basically that I get to play in the dirt. It's something that I loved to do as a kid growing up in Arizona. And once again, I found myself doing the same thing as an adult for my career. In fact, I remember one of the first things that as soon as I got hired at JPL, I was so excited to be like, have a college degree and join all these very smart people and do all this hard analysis and challenging tasks. And the first thing they had me do was shovel a bunch of Mars dirt into a sandbox. So I was literally playing in the dirt and shoveling dirt for my first task at JPL. So here's a visualization of where I'm from. So that darker red blob in the center of the four, we call those the four corner states, because those 4 states actually create 4 corners. And you can actually go to that area and you can stand in one spot and be in 4 states at one time. So that's kind of cool. But that's where the Navajo Nation is located. And that's traditionally where our homelands were, even before any contact. And so we have a lot of deep history and stories that surround how the land came to be and developed, and a lot of our origin stories and folklore and all that stuff are centered around landscapes and things that you might find there. I grew up in Holbrook, Arizona, which is that blue star just the bottom part of that red blob, and I now live in Pasadena, California, which is over in California, Los Angeles area near the ocean. This is a side-by-side picture of Mars, an actual picture of Mars that the Curiosity rover took at the foothills of Gale Crater. Gale Crater is where the Curiosity rover currently is, and it's driving around and taking cool pictures and drilling in rocks. Its mission was to look for if Mars had all the right conditions for life to have existed there. And it actually accomplished its mission. It said, yes, it has all the stuff. It has traces of water. It has signs of carbon. The atmosphere isn't so harsh that that at one point, if there was standing water and there was a better atmosphere, life could potentially have existed there. And so that was a cool thing to figure out. But one of the cool things that I like to show is that this is another picture. On the right here is a picture of me standing near where my grandparents live on the Navajo Nation. This is also the area that I was born. And you can see the similarities between the 2 pictures. Like, look at the foothills, look at the colors, look at the colors of the layers, look at the loose rocks that are scattered around the feet. This just goes to show that Earth and Mars are actually both terrestrial rocky planets, that they're related. They have a similar structure, internal structure, like they have a core, mantle, and crust, and they developed in a similar way over billions of years. To help drive that home, I have some more comparisons. This is a picture of me standing. There's a place in Arizona called Lake Powell, which is actually a man-made lake, but it was made by putting a dam up in a giant canyon. And so that canyon, that you can see the canyon walls there on the left, that's where I'm standing. It has all these layers of sandstone. And so you can imagine that just every layer is just telling a story of that time period in its history. And the same thing can be found on Mars. You can see there on the right is Vera Rubin Ridge on Mars. This is also taken by the Curiosity rover. Similar layering and coloration on the rocks. It's likely that those little cliffs that you're seeing there are also sandstone. Here are more pictures of Mars. You can, when it's in color, you can really see the similarities between places you might find on Earth. Especially if I show you this picture, which if I told you it was taken on Mars, you might believe me, but it's not. It's actually taken by me, again, in the Painted Desert in Arizona. So I just like to draw this comparison because it makes it more obvious to us that our 2 planets are very similar and related. And when we're actually studying Mars and its history and whether or not life forms could exist there, discovering how the water shaped the land, all of that is helping us inform, give us knowledge about our own planet. So it's not, even though it's cool to study Mars for all those other reasons, it's actually giving us a lot of insight about our own planet. I'm going to break up my presentation today in describing past, present, and future of Mars missions to show how one mission might influence the next and influence the next, and then how it's influencing the future of Mars and exploration of Mars. So first, we're going to talk about the past. This is a set of images of Mars rovers that we have sent to Mars in the past. This doesn't include all the orbiting missions, all the satellites that we've sent there. These are really just the ones that we've landed, and these are really just the ones that had wheels. We've also sent a bunch of landers to Mars that might land in one space and do science in one place. Those are missions like the Phoenix mission and the InSight mission. But we've also sent a bunch of rovers. So the first one we sent up is this little guy down at the bottom called Sojourner. This was really just a demonstration mission to show that we can actually drive a robot at all on another planet. And so once we didn't have too many science goals for it, but once we sort of demonstrated that we could actually drive around and operate a robot on Mars, we decided to send a bigger robot. So the MER rover, MER stands for Mars Exploration Rover, was actually a pair of twin robots. So there was two robots that looked like that MER image. One was called Spirit and one was called Opportunity. They were designed really just to operate for about 6 months on Mars, but they ended up operating for more than 12 years, which was kind of incredible. And so it drove around and it took pictures, amazing pictures. It had an arm that was able to reach out and abrade the tops of rocks with a rock abrasion tool. And its main goal and its purpose was to see if we could determine if there was if there was water on Mars. And it accomplished its mission. It said, yes, we believe, because of all the pictures and analysis that we've done with this rover, that Mars once had waterways, flowing water, giant lakes. So that was a really exciting find. And so then the next step was to send something like the Mars Science Laboratory. That's this big guy in the back here. It's the biggest rover we had sent to date. It's the size of a small SUV. And the goal of this was that the reason why they call it the Mars Science Laboratory is because we actually thought, let's actually look to see if we can find if Mars has all the right conditions for life to exist there by sending an entire laboratory in the body of the rover. So inside this giant box-looking body, there's several science instruments. And the rover drills into rocks and turns that rock into powder. And then we take that powder and we drop it off to the science instruments inside the rover. And it uses that powder to analyze what the geologic makeup of each of those rocks are and tries to look for traces of things like water and carbon. And so it, like I mentioned before, it accomplished its mission. It said, yes, Mars had all the right elements for life to exist there. And so the next step after that was to start making the Mars 2020 rover. And that's happening right now. And that's the mission that I'm currently working on. You can see it's very similar in the way that it looks to the Mars Science Laboratory. And that's because we're using much of the same design, the same body, the same battery, the same remote sensing headmast. Similar rocky bogie system is what they call this outrigger system that holds the wheels. Wheels are similar, but they're a little bit different. You can see the treads on the Curiosity rover and the treads on the Mars 2020 rover are slightly different. That was just to improve, to make sure that we didn't wear away the wheels too quickly. Because you can see, if you look closely, the Curiosity wheels are pretty beat up. They've got a lot of dents and tiny little tears in them, but they're actually very tough. They've done tons of tests to show that even though they're going to be driving over jagged rocks for a long time, it will withstand and not fall apart. So that's pretty cool. So the Curiosity rover, like I said, is currently up there right now, still operating. We sent it up in 2012. I worked on a team that worked on its sample acquisition system. This is where it landed. It's called Gale Crater. And it was a giant crater that was created by an impact at some point. And it likely had standing water on the inside of it. And it also created a giant mountain on the right in the middle. So right in the middle of this giant crater is Mount Sharp. And they thought, if we send our rover in there and we drive up that mountain, we might be able to see all the different layers that sort of will tell us the history of Mars's environment. This is on our lab. We have an area called the Mars Yard, And we actually have a replica of the rover that we use to test all of the rover sequences here on Earth before we have it do it on Mars. You can see the Mars yard is a dirt lot that we have little hills for it to play around on, a bunch of rocks for it to navigate around. It's a cool place. Here's a picture of me working late one night in that test bed, and you can see how big the rover is. It's about 7 feet tall. And I think the arm, when it extends its arm out, is also about 7 feet long. This is the turret that sits at the end of the arm of Curiosity. This turret just has a bunch of little tools that it can use. Some cameras, science instruments, imagers, a rock abrasion tool, and a drill. And this drill drills into rocks and turns it into a powder, and we can process sort of like we put it through a sample processing system, which is located on the side here, and that basically just allows us to put it through some sieves and portion it into these nicely sized portions that the science instruments like, so that the science instrument can receive it in a standard condition. We took that design, or that the layout of that turret, and we made the exact same turret here on Earth, and we put it inside a big vacuum chamber. And this chamber we could use to mimic Mars's atmosphere. So we would take it to a very cold temperature, and we would take it to very hot temperatures. We could take all the air out of it to get a low pressure inside, and we could backfill it with something like CO2, which is similar to the atmosphere that Mars has. And we can drill in that environment to see how sample and powder and dust likes to flow through the system. And so here's us setting up a scoop test. This is actually a Mars simulant that we fabricated. So there's scientists here that determine what they think Mars's sand is made of, and they replicated it, and they made a little bucket for us to actually practice our scoop on. And there's us getting in our test bed, getting sort of what we thought was the perfect scoop, by doing a series of motions and vibrations to get the sample to move where we wanted it to. And then there's us getting the actual scoop on Mars. We did the same thing for drilling. Here's us. Here's the drill inside the test chamber here on Earth. And then here's us deploying the arm on Mars so that we can do our first drill. And there's the first time we drilled on Mars. So the rover has a sort of like I was describing before, it has a plan to sort of drive up Mount Sharp to sort of try to experience a bunch of different type of geology along the way. And because they're moving through layers of that mountain, we're actually getting a good idea of what the history is. It also gives us a good idea of, like, if there was water there and it was flowing in a certain way, what types of signatures and things might have flowed with that water into different areas of the crater. So this is sort of the white path you see there is the intended path for the rover to drive. And I think I took this down, or brought this down just to show a recent drilling activity. This was done maybe a month ago, and it's just cool to see that after they drilled, the rock shifted a little bit. I think this is the last selfie that the rover took. The rover can take selfies. It actually has a camera at the end of its turret, of its arm. And the way it gets this image is by basically, as if you were taking a selfie, holding your cell phone away from your face, and then taking a whole bunch of images, and then we stitch them together. And so, I guess that's the reason why you can't see the arm in this picture, because every time we basically crop out the arm, and so that's how it gets its selfies. These are all the different drills that we've done to date, and the location that we've taken them. We started up here, and this is all our driving and all the drills that we've done along the way so far. And I pulled these down because these pictures were taken over the weekend. So this just goes to show you that the rover is still active, still doing things. And if you ever wanted to see what the rover was up to, you can go to the public website for the Mars Science Laboratory and look at the raw images, and it will show you all the images that it took that day or the day before, depending on when it got its download. So that's pretty cool. You could still keep tabs of that, still operating, but the next exciting thing is that we are getting ready for the next mission. So the Mars 2020 rover, like I said, is very similar to the Curiosity rover in its size and design. The thing that's different about it is that the turret at the end of the arm now has a different kind of drill. This drill is actually a coring drill. So we want to be able to drill into rocks and pull out a nice intact cylinder of rock, almost the size of a piece of chalk. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to take that rock core that has all of its history preserved inside of it, put it inside of a sample tube that we can actually seal up, hermetically seal, so that the rock core is safe inside. And then in the future missions, we have 2 more missions planned after this, try to bring those tubes back to Earth. And so that we can study it here with all the science power and the instruments and the people that we have here. And the idea is that if we're able to get a rock sample here and use the more powerful instruments we have on Earth, we might be able to see if life actually did exist there. This is ancient microbial type of life that might have existed if there was standing water there or a flowing river there or something like that. So this is sort of the final mission to help us really determine if life existed on Mars. This is the area that it's going to land on Mars. We're landing in another crater, another impact crater that was at one point a giant lake bed. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with, let's see, like Lake Tahoe is a pretty big lake here in California. Scientists think that this lake could have been about that size. And we're trying to land ourselves in the area of that crater that was near the edge where there might have been mountains that, or at least a ridge that formed on the outside, and it would have created a little, what we call a delta. So this is, if there was water flowing, you might even see there's a little impression here. There might have been water flowing through there and then flowing into the lake and sort of spreading out here. So if we land the Perseverance rover here, we might be able to see what was coming down from all these mountains, but also see what might have been living inside this lake. So I just actually finished up my role on that mission. I was in charge of the rover's drill bits. The Perseverance rover can actually exchange out bits as it needs to, and we're sending a total of 9 bits with this rover. And there's 3 different types you can use. One of them gets us that rock core that I was talking about. There's another one called an abrading bit, which is the one I'm holding here. It actually can make a shallow abrasion in the top of a rock, about 2 inches in diameter. And that's really just to get through the top layer of the rock. The outer layer of a rock is where it might have been weathered, it might have oxidized over time, or a lot of it's whatever science or history or geologic information it holds might be contaminated with erosion and radiation and oxidation and that kind of stuff. So we want to try to get underneath that top layer of the rock so that we can see the nice preserved inside of the rock. Another bit that we're sending with it is what's called a regolith bit. A regolith bit picks up loose rocky material or sand. It can pick up loose sand. So this is me and my team up in the top left. I had 2 support engineers, and then we had some technicians, and we had a bunch of what we call quality assurance engineers and contamination control engineers. So there's just tons of people that I would interface with every day with my job. But in that picture, we had just finished assembling all of the bits that were going to go into the rover just before it's ready to fly to Mars. And you can see them all lined up there. They're all gold in color, and there's actually a reason for that. This mission, because we're trying to look for signatures of ancient life, we don't want to accidentally get human DNA on it, and that can be transferred by touching it without gloved hands, maybe a piece of hair falling on it, just little pieces of dust and threads that might come from your clothes. All of those things would be bad things to get onto these drill bits that are going to touch Mars. So we had to be very, very cautious when we built up these drill bits. So the coating on the outside, the gold coating, is actually a coating that's called titanium nitride, and it's something that actually helps us with keeping it clean, because there might be some contaminants that, no matter how clean we assemble this thing, might still exist either inside the rover or when it's being stored on Mars, and that gold coating helps to make sure that that stuff won't stick to the surface of the bit. All the bits live in what we call a bit carousel. So that's what you can see in the top right. That bit carousel spins around, and the rover can pick which bit it wants to use that bit, put it back into the bit holder, spin it around so that we can take the tube out from a different station. So that's a pretty cool mechanism. And you can see the picture at the bottom is the bit carousel with all the bits inside being assembled to the rover. This is the rover all built up. I think this is the day that they were trying to test out the mobility, the wheels. So you can see it's driving over this little ramp here. The Mars 2020 rover has a ton of new science instruments on it. Pixel and Sherlock are both instruments that live on the turret, so they're imagers. So once we abrade into the top of the rock, we can spin that turret around, and we can use Sherlock to use an ultraviolet spectrometer, or Pixel, an X-ray spectrometer, to look and image the rocks. We also have some cool new cameras, a zoom camera, and also the same laser camera that the Curiosity have. We're also sending that with Mars 2020. One of the cool things that we're sending up is a science instrument called MOXIE, and that is actually going to attempt to produce breathable oxygen from Martian air, which is CO2. And so that's really just an experiment to demonstrate that we can do that. And if we can, that would be a really cool thing for us to be able to use whenever we eventually possibly send humans to Mars. This is the rover. It's completely built up, and it has been sort of folded up into its launch stow position and installed into the heat shield. So this is the sort of protective shield shell that it's going to live in as it's flying from Earth to Mars, and it protects it. When we first get to Mars, when we start entering the atmosphere, it'll get really hot, and so the heat shield helps protect the rover from getting too hot. And then once we get inside the atmosphere, it ejects the bottom pan of that. And so here it is all tucked up, and you can see right here where this gold plate is, there's a little funny thing sitting there. That's actually a helicopter. We are sending a helicopter to Mars to demonstrate that we can fly anything on Mars. We've never flown anything on Mars. And so the earlier part of my presentation, when I said that we sent a little tiny rover to just prove that we could drive a robot on Mars, that's sort of the same thing that's happening with this helicopter. We just want to prove that we can fly things on Mars, and who knows what it'll lead to. Maybe it means that it's a very efficient way for us to navigate around on Mars, or maybe it gives us an advantage in a certain way, and we might be able to send more and more flying spacecraft to Mars. This is the rover fully assembled, and it's sitting inside that nose cone getting ready for launch. And it launched. It successfully launched on July 30th. This, of course, all happened during COVID shutdown, so all of us had to watch from our homes. So this is me sitting at home with all my team is on a web conference call with me. I look kind of funny and puffy-eyed here because for us in our time zone, the rover launched at 4 in the morning. So I woke up with my team at 4 in the morning to watch it, and then I also got to be involved in a bunch of really cool media outreach events for the rover. So I was on the local news. So what's happening now? Now I transitioned my role on specifically drill bits to sort of help prepare all surface operations type stuff. And we're doing that through a bunch of testing. We have some cool test beds that we're we're doing end-to-end testing to see if we can drill into rocks and get them fully sealed up and stored inside the rover. So up here is a drilling test and what we call our in situ laboratory. So it has a very flight-like arm and turret and mast and everything, and we can practice drilling. Down here is we also built up a twin rover for Perseverance, and it's going to live in the Mars yard and practice its mobility there. I spend a lot of my time in what we call the qualification model dirty testbed. And it just similar to what I said I worked on for Curiosity, which was that us putting a mechanism into a giant vacuum chamber that looked like a walk-in closet. This is another vacuum chamber that is 10 feet tall. It's a giant chamber. And it's this, we're doing the same thing with it. We can set up these rocks on pedestals here, and we can pump out all the air in this chamber. We can make it to a really low pressure like Mars's pressure. We can change the temperature to be like Mars's temperature, and we can drill and practice getting loose regolith material in a Mars-like environment. And this is actually a rock that we cored, and so this is what the rock core will look like once we drill with it. Perseverance is landing very soon, actually. It has reached the point that it's more than halfway done with its travel to Mars. It's going to land on February 18th of next year. So let me talk really quickly about the future. I mentioned before that we want to be able to bring those samples back, and it's going to do that in a series of 2 more possible missions. So this red, what's shown in red here is the Mars 2020 mission that's landing in February. We're going to drill rock cores, save them in tubes, and then leave them on Mars. There's another mission that's going to go up that will include all of these dark blue pieces, which basically is this lander that will carry a little tiny fetch rover. The rover will go out and grab all those tubes that we just saved rock cores in, bring them back to this main base, which we're calling the Mars Ascent vehicle, and place them inside a little traveling, it's basically going to look like a sphere that will hold and protect all these tubes. And we're going to launch that guy up into orbit around Mars. And then a third mission is this light blue one is going to go to Mars, but it's never going to land. It'll just orbit around Mars. It'll catch all the samples and then bring them back to Earth. So all of this is in the future. It's sort of the evolution of our Martian missions, and ultimately it's likely going to end in sending our first human mission to Mars. So that's everything I have on the past, present, and future of Mars exploration. Let me end this slideshow and jump back onto. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, while you're doing that, Aaron, I just want to say a huge thank you. What a cool rapid fire tour of all the stuff that's going on. Again, past, present, and future of Mars. So thank you so much for sharing all that today and your own role in making all that happen. It's so awesome. So we're going to dive in with questions. We got 5 classes live from across the U.S. and Canada, and I'll take as many as we can. But what we'll do first is go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama for Miss Foster's class. They've been joining us for sessions all the last couple months. Always a good time having them. So Miss Foster students, come on in.
Okay, so when you send a rover into space, does it ever interfere with anything like asteroids? And if you don't know if it does, will you be able to stop it from hitting something like an asteroid?
Good question. So we actually have an area, a whole division at JPL that deals with navigation. They plan out a flight path for all of our missions, and they can do it really precisely just through analysis and calculations. And they also have, they're also constantly monitoring all the other missions, making sure that 2 missions won't get too close to each other or collide. But they can also track things like asteroids, things that are big, I guess, celestial bodies that might potentially interfere with any of our missions. They track those as well. And so they plan these out way far in advance to make sure that never happens.
We get this question a lot, and I always like to highlight the fact that, a lot of science fiction depictions of space have like asteroids everywhere, and you're diving your spaceship between asteroids, and asteroids are fairly infrequent in the whole scale of space. It's very hard to run into an asteroid, although sometimes we try and run into an asteroid like Bennu, which we'll get to if we don't get a question about it in the next little bit. So I want to go to Mr. Windish's class, joining us in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho. So Mr. Windish, if you want to demute your mic, come on in, share one of your questions. You're good to go. Almost there. Just demute your microphone in the bottom, big mic symbol.
All right,
There you go.
Who's asking? Well, we had a question from Emery that was, do you control the rover or does it have a mind of its own?
Oh, good question. A little bit of both. So we actually have people on lab that are called rover planners, and they will plan out the activities of a rover, usually definitely for a day out, but sometimes they'll plan like 5 days in sequence. But usually we expect the rover to check in with us every day at the end of its Martian day. So let me just really quickly explain that. So a Martian day is about 40 minutes longer than an Earth day. So it's almost the same, but it's just barely off. So that's always funny because I worked on Curiosity's downlink operations. That means the team that receives all the information from the rover just after it's finished its day. So we get to sort of look through everything and analyze if the rover completed all the tasks that we asked it to do, what's the current state it's in, and is it safe to plan for the next day's activity. And so the same thing will happen. They'll plan out a couple days in advance. There'll be a team to assess if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. But throughout the day, the rover is really just following the instructions that have been given to it. And sometimes those instructions have a little bit, relying a little bit on the rover to have a brain of its own. So something like when we're drilling, we actually programmed into the drilling sequence the ability for it to adjust its own parameters based off of what kind of rock it's drilling. So if it's a really hard rock or if it's really soft rock, it can decide to percuss harder to sort of hammer at the rock or to spin faster. So that all helps us make sure that we get a good core that's not broken up into too many pieces or pulverized into powder or anything like that. It also makes sure that we can elongate the mechanism life, make sure that we don't wear out our bit too fast or wear out the whole drilling mechanism too fast. Another area that the rover has its own brain is in mobility. So when it's driving on Mars, sometimes we know that we're not going to be stopping and looking around too much. We just know we want to get to a certain place quickly. They'll actually give it its the ability to sort of image the area around it, see if there's large objects around it, see if there's a cliff or a hill or something that it wants to avoid, and it can plan out its own path. So those are some cool things that it can do on its own.
Sorry. Yeah, super cool. You do want to avoid driving rovers off cliffs. That is a really terrible end to a mission after going across. We're going to go to Mr. Fisher's class next, and then I'm going to take a great question from a Mohawk Nation territory in Ontario from YouTube. So Mr. Fisher's class joining us live in Canada and Ontario. You guys want to come in, just demute your mic, and you're good to go. Perfect. Guys.
To communicate to people on Earth, like let's say you go past Mars or somewhere farther away, is there a way to communicate with Earth faster or a way to speed up? Because I know that the farther you go, the longer the radio wave takes to reach Earth. So is there a way to like speed it up?
Good question. A lot of the times, I don't think you can speed up the direct transfer of a signal. We know that if we have the best direct connection with Mars, it'll take about 7 minutes for that information to get to us. But we don't always have a direct connection. We always usually have to rely on a relay of some sort. So usually there's 3 orbiting satellite missions around Mars. And what we'll do is the rover will do its activities for the day. It'll send its uplink information to one of those satellites. Satellite will store it and hold on to it until Earth is ready to communicate with the satellite. And the satellite can talk with us much faster than a direct connection with the rover can. And this is all tied into what we call the deep space network. The deep space network is actually housed at JPL, even though it's a NASA-wide, even worldwide communication system with all of the spacecraft that are out there. And so it's a set of 3 giant satellite stations positioned equal distance around the world. So we have a station of satellites. There are these giant football-sized satellites, and there's a cluster of them. There might be like 5 or 6 in one cluster. There's one station in California. There's another station in Canberra, Australia, and there's another station in Madrid, Spain. And so that means that whichever way the Earth is in its rotating orbit, it always is looking in the right direction of all of our spacecraft out there. So that's how we control all of NASA satellites, but also all of like Japan's and Europe's, and I think Canada's, like all of them go through the Deep Space Network.
Very cool. Awesome, Aaron. I want to sneak in a question before the class has to go in Lafayette, Louisiana. So Mr. Dupuis' class, come on in. Go for it, guys.
Yeah, how's it going? How does your success fit into the timeline of your manned missions for Mars?
For manned missions to Mars. Okay. So one, this rover is doing more demonstration to help us take the next step in a human mission to Mars. I think there's still a lot to figure out. One, it's really difficult to land heavy things on Mars, and so the mission the size of Curiosity is the heaviest and largest thing we've been able to send there to date. The Mars 2020 rover is a similar size and weight, but the upgrade there is that we have a new entry, descent, landing, I guess, sequence, or it also has a little bit of brain power programmed into it, where it actually can really quickly map out the surface that it's about to land on and autocorrect itself to sort of pinpoint a more direct landing ellipse. That'll help us with human missions to Mars, to like if we want to try to get supply missions or something into a close area, instead of like being able right now we only have the ability to send something in a giant area, and then the next one has to go into another giant area. You have to travel a long distance to be able to get to those two spots. If we want to send humans, we have to be able to land heavy things over a long period of time, and then bringing those sample tubes back from Mars to Earth will be the first time that we've ever launched anything from Mars and returned it to Earth. So that's another thing that's sort of paving the path for human missions.
Super cool. Thanks, guys, for getting that question. As I know you have to go, but we really appreciate you joining us. And you can check out the rest of the session on YouTube after the fact, too. We actually are getting close to the end of the session. So, Aaron, we're going to take a couple more questions before we wrap up. Ms. Nilville will come to you in 1 second. I just want to take this one from Ms. Stanton's class online first. So, again, Mohawk Nation territory in Ontario. They want to know about the spokes of the wheels of the rovers. How much weight are they supporting? How do they not break? And what are they made of, Aaron?
That's a good question. So the wheels are actually all metallic. So the spokes are metallic, but also the outer wheel part of it is metallic. So that's why it's seeing all those dents and everything, is because it's made out of a thin piece of metal. We can't really send things like rubber to Mars because rubber doesn't do well in extreme temperatures. If it's really hot there, it could melt. If it's really cold there, they might crack and blister. So we actually made it all out of metal. And the spokes, I don't know exactly the material. It's probably a titanium or something. Titanium gives us a nice flexibility, but it's also very strong, so it won't break. So yeah, that's likely what it's made out of. And the size of the rover, that's a really good question. The rover, even though we've designed it to be as lightweight as possible, it's still pretty heavy, so it can handle a lot of weight.
Yeah. If you guys want to check out some of our past sessions, I think Abigail Freeman might have talked about this recently, is how the rover landed on Mars. It's one of the coolest stories ever. Some really amazing video of that online, and hopefully you can check out that when you're done this broadcast. All right, I want to go to Miss Nillo's class, joining us in Los Lunas, New Mexico. Come on in and just end it off.
Hello. First of all, Aaron, I wanted to tell you, I teach third graders. In the last couple of weeks, we actually have been doing an entire unit on perseverance and ingenuity, and we've been building prototypes of the helicopter and testing them.
Oh.
And so one of the questions the students have, and it's something that's just been coming up a lot, is because we know how long it takes to get to Mars, and we know how long when they launch it, when it's going to land. The students want to know, like, what happens if it breaks? Like, what happens if the rover gets up there, it isn't working and collecting the samples you need it to? What mechanisms do you have in place to fix it, or do you have to scrap the mission and then try to get it back to Earth?
Gotcha. That's a great question. And that's one of the biggest challenges we always have to deal with, is we don't there is no way to fix it. When something starts to go wrong on a mission, we sort of have to just adapt and try to work without it. A similar situation is when the Mars exploration rovers were driving around. There came a point where one of its wheels was no longer working and it couldn't spin. So it had to. The rover actually was dragging a wheel around, and one of the planners determined that it was actually better, and a way to work around it is if the rover drove backwards. It actually helped a lot. So that was something where they had to fix it with whatever they had on Mars. But in order to make sure that things don't break down, we just have to over-engineer everything up front. We have to make sure that we test everything extensively, and we also have to design it to last much longer than we expect it to last. So if they tell us that it has to operate on Mars for 1 Martian year, which is 2 Earth years, we try to design it to last for 10 years on Earth.
Fantastic. Great questions, guys. And I know that all of your classes, some of the students are even at the camera. I have many more. Unfortunately, we are going to another broadcast in a minute. So what I want to do is a couple things. One is, again, check out AaronYazzie.com. He's a fantastic speaker and explorer and scientific communicator, as you guys have got a chance to see today. So check that out to learn a little more about him. He's also on Twitter at Yazzie Says. And we talked about the amazing rover on Mars presently. You can check out NASA's resources for that on the link below. NASA's resources in general, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory site in general, are some of the most top-notch space exploration education programs in the world. So if you're keen, check those out. And Aaron, before we wrap up, is there any last message you'd like to share with kids about how they can get inspired by Mars, learn more about you? Anything you'd like to share with us to end off the broadcast today?
Yeah, sure. So just, if you're interested in this, it's all happening right now. It's a very exciting time to tune in to what NASA's doing and what is happening on Mars. Tune in February to see it land. And I really like to when I showed you that there's an evolution of Martian missions happening that will eventually lead to humans getting there. All of these things are happening in a timeline that means that if you're in school right now and you want to become a NASA engineer or aerospace engineer or something, you could get through school, you could graduate with an engineering degree or a science degree and be someone that actually works on that mission. You might be the person that works on the return mission. When I was in school, the Mars exploration rovers were being built, and then Curiosity got sent, and then I got to work on that. So all of this is going to happen in your lifetime. So if you want to do it, you totally can.
Fantastic. For the students that have more questions too, send them to me. I'll try and get them to Aaron if I can, or find some answers for you. Aaron, this is fantastic as always, man. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. So what we do at the end of every broadcast, as you know, I'm going to bring in all our classes. So Miss Foster's, Mr. Windish, Mr. Fisher, and Miss Nilvo join me in saying a big thank you and goodbye.